It's March 15. Ukraine Media Center confirms starts its operation. My name is Svetlana Shapurenko. Now we will be talking about prevention of fires in ecosystems. Our guest today is Anatolii Shkarbuta, Deputy Head of the Prevention Unit of the Fire Safety Office of the Emergencies Prevention Department of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Mr. Anatolii, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Sorry, good morning. Good morning. So, Mr. Anatolii, can you share the statistics about the fires in the ecosystems within last year? Maybe you have some statistics for this year. And what is the distribution by regions or breakdown by regions and seasons? Well, unfortunately, this is the statistics that makes us have briefings like this, because this year we expect the number of fires to increase compared to this similar period of the last year. For example, within the last year, we had about 1,000 fires within the same period, but this year we already had 2,500. Within 2 months of this year, we already have 3 casualties and 5 people who were injured as a result of fires. State Emergency Service urges everybody to adhere to the fire safety rules, because any fires are of harm not only to environment but also to flora and fauna and people. So what is the cause of growth of number of fires? You keep expanding your awareness program among the population, but the number of fires keeps growing. The main cause of fire is the intentional burning of dry vegetation, and lesser amount accounts for uncautious behavior with fire. Well, since Soviet era, people of elderly age, as the weather becomes warmer, they start cleaning up their land plots, basically by burning the vegetation. But unfortunately, as the statistics demonstrates, as the environmentalists say, agriculturalists say, this does not result in improvement of soil, improvement of look of the land plots. It only results in environmental contamination of the territory, deterioration of health of the population, including those very elderly who burn it, and destruction of flora and fauna. However, under conditions of war, when the state spends a lot on putting out those fires, it's something unacceptable at all. Well, do the fires resulting from Russian attacks are also added to your statistics? I mean, when we down our air defense forces down the drones or rockets or something like this. Well, yes, there are fires that result from those reasons, but they are incomparably smaller in number than those fires resulting from intentional burning of dry vegetation. So again, let's remind our citizens how to behave properly, how to prevent the fires. Well, first of all, do not burn out the dry vegetation. Environmentalists, the agricultural experts, they recommend to compost the residues of the dry vegetation and thus use them as fertilizer. The majority of territorial communities also organize centralized disposal of such trash. So when you have no opportunity to compost, please contact the head of your territorial community so they can organize the transport and centralized disposal of this kind of waste. We understand that the biggest threat is spreading of such small fire during the fire hazardous season. During those seasons, the citizens are not recommended to visit forests, other open areas without excessive need, because their negligence. For example, when people visit a forest using their transport, they may even unintentionally ignite the dry vegetation using the exhaust gases or something like this, or agricultural machinery that may result in forest fire. Also, the recreation should be safe. I know people like to rest in nature, and sometimes it results in fires, so please take maximum caution. Okay, so what should people do if they become a witness of fire? What are the basic steps? First of all, call the fire rescue service, the representatives of state emergency service, and only that way you can quickly put out the fire and prevent its spreading. Unfortunately, as the statistics show, the people become casualties when they try to put out the fire by themselves. The majority of the elderly, they become the hostages of this situation and unfortunately die and get injured, mostly the elderly ones. However, we also have cases when people of young age dies too during fires like this. For example, the last case happened in Kharkiv region on the 8th of March, and a man of my age decided to burn down some dry vegetation. Then the wind caught the fire, it got out of control. The man tried to put it out, his clothing caught fire, and he unfortunately died. And such cases are numerous. This is why we're urging everybody, the children, the grandchildren, to do the awareness campaign with their elderly relatives, because it's difficult to convince them through mass media. Please, so children, neighbors, and grandchildren, explain your elderly ones that they should not burn the dry vegetation, and thus we can reduce the number of casualties. Well, you've mentioned that 2 people have died this year. One was in Kharkiv region. You've mentioned it. And what are the other regions? What are the other regions which are the leaders of these sad statistics? Well, unfortunately, the death does happen. And you know, this year the biggest number of fires was in Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, Kharkiv, and Kyiv regions. As the statistics show, those are the biggest regions in terms of fires. So the majority of them are the regions along the front lines where the active battle operations are going on. But the main causes of fire again is the negligent attitude, negligent violation of fire safety rules by our citizens. For example, I would like to emphasize that such fires, they get out of control because of the weather conditions, like thrust of wind. We remember the last event like that happened in Kyiv, in Osakorki district, when more than 3 hectares of dry vegetation were burnt out, which resulted in environmental loss. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but a lot of material resources of the state were spent to put out this fire. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on the floor? Ukrinform, Marina Kojuhar. Sir, are those burners, are they being held accountable? What kind of liability is that, and should it be intensified? Yes, we do the preventive raids over the settlements, trying to prevent the fire. During those raids, we identify the violators, whom we hold accountable on administrative level. We bring them to administrative liability, and this type of work is done not only by the representatives of state emergency service, but also of forestry, the environmentalists, the local governments, national police of Ukraine. All of them are involved in identification of the burners who are being brought to liability. First of all, the state emergency service is involved in awareness campaigns with violators and burners, but the real burners whom we caught in the act, they are being brought to administrative liability, just like those who repeatedly are involved in this type of violation. Unfortunately, we have to bring people to liability because it becomes an important lever, you know, because the penalty sanctions are increased now, and we may bring people to liability, penalizing them in amount of 1500 to 3000 hryvnia. And in case the fire resulted in significant loss, the penalty may be over 15,000 hryvnia and may result in criminal liability of the citizens. Sir, in your opinion, is this penalty sufficient? And how many times do you, or how frequently do you come across the cases of repeated violations? We don't identify the repeated violation very frequently, but for example, a pensioner who paid a penalty in amount of 3000 hryvnia, you know, they are very less likely to repeat what they were doing. We identify very little number of such cases, but among those people who were never brought to liability, so unless they are caught in the act, unless there is a preventive awareness work done in their regard, they keep doing it year by year. This is why we try to focus on broad awareness campaign, including through mass media, to make sure that we prevent cases like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Anatolii. More questions? Olena Litvinenko. Mr. Anatolii, the territory of Ukraine is pretty densely mined by our enemy. We know about 1/3 of our territory can potentially be contaminated with mines. Does such burning of dry vegetation, I mean the man-made dry vegetation burning, may it result in detonation of explosive device? And if it does, what is the scale of threat? Thank you for your question. It's a very relevant question indeed. The cases of burning of dry vegetation, specifically in the areas along the front lines and those that were deoccupied, yes, it has this component of additional threat related to the residual unexploded munitions. Visiting ecosystems such as forests does not only result in fires. Those territories are posing threat to the people that is represented by the dense mining by the enemy, and burning of dry vegetation in those territories may really result in activation of unexploded ordnance that, and the radius of the effective radius of such explosive devices is not always identified. So it's not like you set the grass on fire and you step inside and you're safe. So we urge all the citizens not to visit any unfamiliar areas, because the dense mining there may pose another serious threat. Thank you very much, Mr. Anatolii. Let me remind our listeners, we were talking about prevention of fires in ecosystems, and our next briefing will be at 11 o'clock. We will talk about the captured mercenaries from the global south countries and what should their governments do to prevent their citizens from dying in someone else's war.